Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby.
Wow, what a day today is. There's so many things happening. I don't know where to start. I mean, you're going to be shocked. Our audience is going to be shocked at some of the things happening.
There's some big revelations. I can't wait. We've got a great show.
In the studio with us, Tony Carbonetti, used to be
John?
chief of staff to the mayor, Rudy. And Rudy, you were deputy mayor to the other Rudy, too, Rudy Washington. And Judge Weinberg, you were chief consigliere or whatever to Peter Vallone, the Speaker of the House.
When these guys were doing a great job at City Hall. Yes.
Oh, boy, do we need you back.
We couldn't do it without the judge.
One of you
Speaker
guys
Vallone.
really screwed it up and came up with term limits, and we ended up with we ended up with the sub-league.
By the way, I want to get into legal stuff. This is interesting. Jim Jordan with the House Oversight Committee, you guys, has come out, and he is now subpoenaing. This is the company tied to the judge in New York. Let's remind everybody, it's the Trump
judge.
It's the Trump judge.
The judge that wants to sentence President Trump.
Yeah, next month.
Now, his daughter works for the Democratic National Committee? Or?
Well, she works for a firm, John, that helps Biden, helps Kamala Harris, big money.
How much money has she raised?
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, a lot, and they've
Not
gotten
even
paid.
$1 million?
Well, no.
Millions and millions.
Millions, forgive me, you're right, millions. She's raised millions.
I thought it was $80 million.
Yeah, I'm actually
Where the heck are you?
hang on, I'm actually talking about how much she has gotten
No.
paid.
No.
Actually, I'm talking about how much she's gotten paid.
She's raised millions and she's gotten hundreds of thousands.
Yes. Thank you for clearing that up. But let's talk about why this is important, because
now,
it's
Jim
a
Jordan
conflict
from
of
Congress
interest.
Saying you have a conflict of interest, Mr. Judge. A conflict of interest because
Your daughter.
The better job you do of beating up President Trump, the more money she raises.
Yeah,
she raised money by calling him a convicted felon or whatever they do.
And it's all over her social media. And she's working for Kamala Harris.
How do you say it? Something's rotten in New York.
Yeah, but let's make it very clear.
Not Denmark anymore.
Let's make it very clear. The rules in New York are if you have the appearance of impropriety or an actual conflict and having your daughter making money off of this, an actual conflict, he should have recused himself.
Yes.
End of discussion.
And
he
also,
violated those rules.
Judge, he also donated to the Biden campaign
Another
himself.
violation.
Hello.
But guys, the law don't apply to them. So,
I forgot.
That's right.
You're right.
Look at me.
That's right.
It's New York. There are no laws for them.
It's Chinatown, Jake.
Rudy Washington, you're black, and the rules apply to you.
Huh?
So what's the difference in your color black versus his color black?
You lost me, Cat. I'm trying to...
Who's color black? Wait a minute.
Why, how come Trump pointed at me when he said black? Some of my best friends are black.
Yeah, Rudy needs you to translate.
Well, before we have what Tony Carbonetti experienced today, let's go to our senator from Kansas, Rita.
Absolutely. We have the great Senator Roger Marshall from Kansas. And Senator Roger Marshall, first of all, we're talking about all of this lawfare clearly against President Trump, Jim Jordan doing the subpoenas. And here it is, the flip-flopping. We don't even know what his challenger stands for yet. I mean, there's so much flip-flopping.
You know, I hate to break up a good conversation. You guys are getting pretty wound up about this one, but listen, this is another chapter of election interference, isn't it? This late in the game, for this to come out of the blue, and you all, it is so complicated. You couldn't make this stuff up and put it on a movie and have people follow the plot. But I think this is the next chapter of election interference. We've been fighting back against Google, who was censoring the assassination attempt story of President Trump. They tried for weeks to keep people from going to that particular site to see that. So this is just one more chapter of election interference as far as I'm concerned.
It goes worse than that. Tony Carbonetti, who was chief of staff to Mayor Rudy Giuliani today, his best friend was down at the jury in New York City, Senator.
Listen to this story, Senator.
He was down at the jury in New York City. So the jury commander comes in and says, how many of you don't speak English? 8 people raised their hand. There was about 60 people in the room. So they said, okay, you can leave. Then he says, how many of you are not American citizens? 12 people raised their hands, and you could leave. How can people don't speak English at all, and 12 people are not citizens, serve on the jury or be called for jury duty, but they take the people that serve jury duty comes from the voting rolls.
Correct.
Bingo. So think about this. So New York City, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. allow anybody to vote in local elections, right? So there has to be some type of voter roll. Is there 2 voter rolls, one for local elections and another voter roll for federal elections?
Nope.
Which is my point. It's too complicated. It's wrought with fraud. It doesn't pass the smell test, does it?
Yeah, no, and listen, it's been happening in a lot of these states, and then a lot of these civil liberties groups are saying, no, it's not fair. Yeah. But in a close election, we got to watch everything. I mean, there's no question. Senator, also, in the middle of all this, and there's so many flip-floppings of Kamala Harris, but I want to get to the numbers, too. This was astounding to me. 818,000. Whoops, a little revision. We added those jobs. Now they got to take them away. How can we trust anything coming out of this White House? That's an enormous amount. It's almost 1 million jobs that were, quote, inflated.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. This is another reason why Americans don't trust the government. I've just finished 40 or 50 roundtables the last 2 weeks across the state of Kansas, and every one of them, several people bring up this, we don't trust the government, whether it's the FBI, the Secret Service, the lawfare you're describing. And here's another example. So why is this so important? They missed the mark by 30%. Again, I think this is election interference. They're falsifying, trying to prop up the Biden-Harris economy, which is really, really soft. They said they had 3 million new jobs. It was only 2 million. They missed it by 30%.
They're lying. They're lying to the American people.
That's it.
Now, there's one more problem, Senator, and we're going to be talking about it in the next segment, but I want you to know about it because you deserve to know about it. The fact that
are you talking about Nancy Pelosi, or what are you referring to, John?
No, the other thing. Hold on. Okay. Well, Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, that's a whole other one, too.
She admitted in a second tape, in her voice, that she screwed up in not bringing
National Guard on
in.
January 6th.
Now, in her voice, she said, I screwed up. And my question is, was she lied to? And who lied to her when they said we don't need it?
Well, I don't think I had the answer to that. But certainly there were senators in the room that heard President Trump request those troops. And eventually we all knew it had to get to Nancy Pelosi to deny them. So she's been complicit in the whole thing from day one. Why was she never asked to appear? If you had to have a true investigation, she absolutely should have been asked to appear in front of the investigation committee. And I'm afraid we'll never know. I'm so frustrated, but
Senator,
nevertheless, yes.
It's Tony Carbonetti. The Capitol Police answered to her when she was Speaker.
Yes.
Pre-incident, there should have been a report issued by the Capitol Police saying we're anticipating a rally at the Capitol. Here's how many people we're anticipating. Here's what we've learned on social media, and here's how we're policing it. And that gets presented to either the Speaker or her Chief of Staff and gets signed off on. That's standard protocol. Where's that document?
I'm with you, and I was talking about that the week of this event. I was talking about the week of the event when I talked to senators one-on-one and said we were in the room when Trump called and asked for more National Guard troops. And the rest of the story is basically history after that. I don't know. There's more questions than answers. It's just so frustrating. I can't begin to try to give you a good answer on it. There's not a good answer, right?
No. Senator, what do we do? How do we get the truth to the American people?
Really, it starts with controlling the majority. So certainly now the House, the Republicans have been in the majority the last 2 years. I think they've had their hands full just trying to fund the government. I know it looks easy, but it is a circus over there when you have such a thin majority. And I think that you have to pick your battles. And here we are. We have an election here in 2 months, and I'm focused. I'm locked in on telling Kamala Harris's story that America has this choice. What type of economy does America want? Do we want a free market economy that rewards innovation, that rewards hard work, or do we want a socialistic economy where everybody gets a trophy and she sets the prices? What type of values?
There's one more thing, forward? Senator. There's one more thing you might not have heard of. We heard yesterday that Kamala Harris and Waltz, the vice presidential candidate, is going to be on a live interview with ABC and Stephanopoulos and that whole crew. Now we find out this afternoon it's going to be pre-taped. So that means if they make a mistake, they can edit it.
And they're also together. I mean, that's the other thing. Senator, she wants to be commander in chief. And what she's afraid of doing an interview by herself, she has to have a running mate next to her, like a wet blanket.
And a soft interview. Remember who's interviewing. You have Bash is doing the interview, and Bash has already said, she never was the czar for the border. So Bash has already taken that position. So how she can do a hard interview?
Senator?
Yes, and President Trump called this out last night. I hope everybody's following him on Truth Social. He called out all this last night, that he called on ABC to say, you have to, if you're not going to do it live, you need to make sure you release the entirety of the interview. This doesn't count. This is not a real interview. This is a softball interview. Like you said, this will be Laurel and Hardy is what this is going to look like with the two of them doing this interview. It won't be a real interview. This is their plan. The more people get to know Kamala Harris, the less they like her. So their job right now is to try to keep her under wraps. She can't help herself. She is a true blue socialist. She is a person that wants to set prices at the grocery store, which is going to lead to shortages and black markets. So they will do everything they can to hide her. It's that simple.
Boy, I wish I could have like 10 hours with her, because I would say, here's what you said. Here's now what you're saying. Which one is it? Because we don't know who she is.
I think in 10 minutes you'd slice her up.
Yeah, I think
she wouldn't last 10 hours.
I would say 10 seconds maybe. I mean, give me a break. There are so many inconsistencies, and it's such a disservice to the American people. That's the thing, Senator. I mean, the American public has no idea what she stands for. Obviously doesn't have a moral compass. She's flipping and flopping like there's no tomorrow. Now, the other day, she's talking about the border wall. I mean, are you kidding me?
She's the queen of the border wall.
Right. Yeah, she's the tough one.
She's the tough one.
Right.
She's big on law and order, Senator. At the same time, she was bailing out all these criminals, the rioters, the BLM rioters, Antifa rioters, and they got out. And what do? They committed violent crimes. Violence, arson, rape, attempted murders. This is serious stuff. That's the people she was bailing out.
Yeah, and Judge, don't forget that people were killed.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
And nobody's been held accountable.
No one's been held accountable. Just like Afghanistan, which she was the last person in the room.
Senator, you're from Kansas. That's an honest state. You guys believe in honesty and integrity. Keep fighting for America.
Hey, we will. But just remember, a zebra doesn't change its stripes. We do know who she is. And we just need to make sure that all of America knows it. So thank you, the three of you out here telling this truth. We're the modern day patriots. Everybody remember what President Trump said after he got shot. Fight, fight, fight. Let's do it.
God bless you.
Thank you,
bless America.
Senator. We love having you on. Thank you.
And right now, calling in.
Yeah, we've got some breaking news right now. We have John Solomon calling in with some big scoops.
Breaking news, WABC.
Well, new news out of Washington. And with us today is John Solomon, justthenews.com. John, give us the new news, the breaking news.
Well, first, the United States Supreme Court, it put a dent in the Biden-Harris administration's efforts to court young voters. The United States Supreme Court declined to revive the Biden administration's latest student loan forgiveness plan. Remember, one was struck down. Then Joe Biden just came back and did some more. And the latest one he did was challenged in court. The appeals court decided they can't go forward. And the Supreme Court said, we agree with the appeals court. No free money to those student loan debtors. They got to pay their own fair share. So a big loss in a program that has political implications for the fall election. In Congress, a couple of big threats coming down. Jim Jordan today.
Well, bottom line, so everybody understands it clearly. The Supreme Court says if anybody's going to give money back to the students, it's got to be Congress, not the President of the United States. It says, oh, give the money. It's Congress that's supposed to give the money. So it's back to Congress to make the decision if they give the money back to the students. That's bottom line.
That is the bottom line, and that's the issue that will go back to the appeals court case to be decided. Does this comply with Congress's wishes? It will probably end up exactly where the last Supreme Court case did, which is, no, Congress didn't authorize this, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can't do it. That's where we're headed.
And Nancy Pelosi told President Biden he couldn't do it, and he just ignored the Supreme Court, and he ignored Nancy Pelosi, because Nancy Pelosi says that's our job to do, not yours, Mr. President.
That is exactly right. She did give him a little bit of a civics lesson a few years ago. He didn't listen, though, and now the Supreme Court is returning to that civics lesson, which is Congress's clause.
My interpretation, to just talk slowly, is that President Biden, even though he was wrong, he was conning some of the people that believed in what he was saying, even though he knew he was not right.
Yeah, listen, he had clear knowledge that this would require an act of Congress. Congress wasn't willing to do it, but he went ahead with it anyways for the political gain. Now the courts are catching up to it, and it's not faring well for him. And also, it's going to disillusion a lot of these students.
I just want all the people out there, there's 1 million people could be listening to us. I just want them to understand what it is.
Yeah, no, you have it exactly right. And again, this still has to go back to the appeals court. This is a temporary ruling, but they're not going to revive it today, which means the court most likely thinks this will end the way the last case did, which is Congress didn't approve it, and therefore Joe Biden can't give it away. And
now,
that will disillusion.
Nancy Pelosi, some new revelations on January 6th. Give us the new revelations.
Well, remember when the finger-pointing started right after January 6th? How could the Capitol be so insecure? How could it get overrun by a bunch of hooligans who are out there protesting? And Nancy Pelosi kept saying, I have nothing to do with security at the Capitol. That's not my job. Well, we found, and we later learned that she had turned down an offer for the National Guard. Well, we have brand new video footage that was kept from us. First, it wasn't in the HBO documentary about Nancy Pelosi's role on January 6th, even though her daughter shot it. But in this footage, she's escaping the Capitol. They're taking her through an evacuation route. And she declares with absolute clarity that she bears responsibility for not better securing the Capitol that day. She was angry that they were just calling the National Guard now. She said they should have been here to start out the day. They should have been there. Exactly what Donald Trump offered. Congress didn't take him up on it. You can hear Nancy Pelosi acknowledging that as she's walking. She also says very clearly she deserves blame and personal responsibility for what happened there. She says, how many times did members ask, are we prepared? Are we prepared? We were not prepared for the worst. We have totally failed. We've got to take some responsibility. So the Nancy Pelosi who told the American public she had nothing to do with security told her daughter while walking out of the Capitol today she did have that responsibility, and she let the American people down. That video footage is available for everybody to see.
Let me ask you another silly question just to straighten it out. Nancy Pelosi, who is Speaker of the House, is taking responsibility. The real question is, if she's being honest and taking responsibility, who conned her into thinking that everything was okay? Because everything was not okay. Was there a big con game going on against Nancy Pelosi?
Well, listen, one of the things we learned a couple of weeks ago is that her staff, her chief of staff, was briefed the night before that the threat index had gone up, that there was a higher degree of violence the next morning. No adaptation occurred. No security plan was augmented. They went with the plan they had when the threat level was much lower. That is something Nancy Pelosi's own chief of staff was directly involved in communicating. So we know that she knew. I think the bigger issue is, remember, Donald Trump used the National Guard during the 2020 summer riots. The Democrats really chafed to that, and I think Nancy Pelosi wanted to look different. than Donald Trump. That's what some of the testimony points to. She didn't like the optics of using National Guard like Trump did, so she opted against it, even though, in the end of the day, as she's walking out of the building, she realized that would have been the better option. The Capitol would have been much more secure. Such an amazing turnabout, and just very important to remind, Nancy Pelosi told the public something very different than what's on this video footage.
John Solomon, I hope the American people get to know the truth and nothing but the truth. Thank you for bringing it into the forefront, and we stay tuned to find out how this thing, how do the British say it, how these things sort themselves out.
Exactly. A lot of sorting to do between now and Election Day.
Thank you so much, and we'll catch up again soon.
You, sir.
Wow, John, that is really powerful. What Solomon just said to you, that she said, we have totally failed. We've got to take responsibility. And yet she was never forced to even testify before the January 6th committee.
No, but I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt that her own staff lied to her, because that's possibly an indication. What do you think, Tony?
Well, the chief of staff, they're saying, was briefed. So it's possible the chief of staff didn't tell her about it. It's possible they were letting, they wanted it to let it happen to see how big the crowd would get and blame Trump for that. That's a possibility. But there's definitely a document sitting out there somewhere that laid out what was going to happen and how they were going to police it. And she was offered the National Guard.
Right. And decided not
Rudy
to
Washington?
obviously take it.
Don't leave the mayor of Washington, D.C. out of it also.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Muriel Bowser, you're right.
She turned it down also.
Right, and she was not called too. And in fact, Trump has said that, Rudy. Trump has said that Muriel Bowser and also Pelosi's office, clearly we know the chief of staff, at least at a minimum.
We've heard the audio before. She blames herself, and she says, why wasn't I told about it?
Yeah, and in fact, we have that audio. This is what when we broke that a couple weeks ago. This is the first one.
And the second one is not as good as the first one, but let's play at least the first one.
Yep, here it is.
Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient resources.
There's not a question of how they have. They don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for more.
And then in this new one,
the Democratic
it's even more.
Party was not letting her take responsibility.
Yes, that's the point, John. Exactly. They did not want her to.
But Kat, what was really offending me is how over and over and over they get away with this. Then they put on a production with hearings.
The big lie.
Well, how do they call it in Nazi Germany and Russia? The big lie.
Yeah. And then
That's what's going on.
They sold it with a Hollywood production.
Yeah.
Hired a Hollywood director.
We got to take a break. Let's take a break, and we're coming back with
the new commissioner of the fire department of New York City, a very interesting guy.
Take a break.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And joining us now here on Katz and Cosby is the new commissioner of the New York City Fire Department, who has an incredible background, Robert Tucker. Robert, it's so great to have you here. First of all, a huge congrats. And what are the big priorities there? Because obviously New York City, there is so much on your plate.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to speak with both of you. I am so excited to be the new fire commissioner of New York City. This is a lifetime dream come true, and I've wanted this job since I was a little boy chasing fire engines up and down Lexington Avenue on my bicycle. Look, these are in terms of priorities, these are the best firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, fire marshals, inspectors in the world. And this is the greatest fire department in the world. But my top priority is keeping the members and the residents of this city safe, and the FDNYs out there every day doing their job.
How complex is it for you? Because you think about how big is the department. And also, Robert, I'm also thinking 9/11's not too far around the corner. And, of course, so many of our great heroic firefighters were rushing towards danger that day and are still dealing with issues afterwards, too.
Yeah, the fire department is a 17,000 person strong organization with a nearly $3 billion budget. It's complex. There's no question about it. I've been in the public safety space my entire life, practically, both in the private sector, running a big security firm here in New York City, and I was an assistant district attorney at the beginning of my career, working for the legendary Dick Brown and in Queens. And so it's very complex. In terms of September 11th, this is the most solemn time in our department. On that day, we lost 343 amazing firefighters and members of our department. I am well aware of the meaning of that anniversary. I'm well aware that we've lost more than 343 amazing members of this department since then to 9/11 related cancer, and it never stops, and we will never forget the sacrifice of all of the members that are still suffering and did suffer, and their families.
Commissioner Tucker, what do you look at in the future, the biggest challenge in running a fire department of this size and of a big city like New York?
Look, New York is a wonderful place, but again, this is the greatest fire department in the world. We've got a big challenge with lithium-ion batteries. My predecessor pointed that out and did a good job identifying that as a big problem. Our chief fire marshal is very busy investigating fires that involve lithium-ion batteries. We've had 3 deaths this year, so deaths are down, but nevertheless, the number of fires are up. And I think that is a tremendous challenge for our fire department. We're learning every day about how to fight those fires. But again, great chiefs, great firefighters. They know what they're doing out there. And I have every confidence that problem will become something that we're more familiar with in the future.
The other big problem was with the electric vehicles, the weight of the batteries on some of the garages. And they were investigating the garages if they could take that much weight. And if there's an increased number of electric cars, they were going to do their homework. Is that report ready yet?
We don't have any a report about the weight and as it relates to the buildings. That sounds like a Department of Buildings issue, but we're certainly aware that micro-mobility devices and vehicles that are battery operated that contain lithium-ion batteries are the future, and we understand that, and we're going to have to deal with the safety risks that come along with that. Toward that end, we obviously encourage New Yorkers to follow manufacturer guidelines for their devices and not purchase illegal aftermarket batteries, and look for that UL certification sticker, which signifies the device has been nationally safety tested.
Well, we love and support you, and thrilled to have you here. And obviously, we are with all the men and women at the fire department there. All 17,000. Wow, wow, wow. The new commissioner, Robert Tucker, thank you so much. Great to have you here on Katz and Cosby. Thank you. Congrats.
Thank you for having me.
Well, congratulations, Commissioner. And Rita, you have the hot news of the day, sponsored by Goya Foods.
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
And the race for the White House, John, is picking up speed as there are 69 days now till Election Day. Trump is set to hold a town hall in Wisconsin tomorrow and will speak at a rally in Pennsylvania on Friday. Elsewhere, Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz, they are taping the interview that they're doing. We're going to talk about that with Michael Goodwin. And also they are kicking off a bus tour in the battleground state of Georgia later this afternoon. And then they're going to do a rally scheduled tomorrow in Savannah. And also, the FBI says a definitive motive in the assassination attempt of former President Trump has not yet been established. The agency provided an update Wednesday afternoon on the investigation of the July 13th shooting at Trump's Pennsylvania rally that killed 1 and injured 2 others. And everybody, those are the top Goya headlines of the day.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. By the way, this just kind of crossing that RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, of course, both former Democrats, both eyeing White House roles if Trump wins the 2024 election. No surprise that they both would do something. I think to have both of them out there, and there's word that we were just reading in the Goya headlines, Tony Carbonetti, that Tulsi Gabbard is going to be part of this town hall tomorrow that Trump is doing, and she's going to be kind of interviewing him. And I think it's smart for them to be putting her out there. I think they should be putting Nikki Haley out there too.
They should get Haley in there. Get Haley in there.
Yeah,
he brought in Tulsi Gabbard, and then he brought in R.F. Kennedy, and I understand him and
Brian Kemp. You're talking about governor.
He made peace with,
yes,
and also
Haley.
Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley, yep.
So he's bringing the Republican Party together to make a team, to be running as a team.
Which is smart.
I'm glad he brought in Nikki Haley. I mean, maybe I didn't like her that much, but she did get 4 million votes.
Absolutely. I think Nikki Haley should get out there with him, just like we're seeing Tulsi Gabbard tomorrow. We saw RFK at that, I was watching that whole announcement. RFK got such an enormous applause when he came out before the Trump crowd. They were so, enthusiastic that he was throwing his support against Trump. And to get Nikki Haley, I agree with you, Judge.
Look, the Republicans have a very strong, deep bench. They should be getting a lot of their top flight people out there as surrogates campaigning in all the swing states. You have people like Senator Cotton. You have people like Nikki Haley. You have Governor Youngkin. You have Governor Burkham. You have You have such terrific people who go there, stand with him, or go in by themselves to campaign for him and get the message out.
And Kamala is doing nothing but rounding up the progressives. And if you want the entire country to look like Los Angeles and New York City, and I love New York City, but it's now run by progressives, as is Los Angeles and San Francisco.
You know,
that's
by
what
the
she's
way,
going to give you.
You know what the latest gambit in California is? It just passed legislation to give $150,000 to immigrants to buy a house. How did that work out in 2008?
By the way, there's an investigation going on in Massachusetts that they put out a secret $1 billion to migrants, and the GOP chairman up there is demanding to know a breakdown of where did this $1 billion go?
Right, where did it go? There are so many questions, you guys. And joining us now, we have Michael Goodwin, who is now joining us on the line here. Michael Goodwin, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist. Great to have you here. There are so many huge issues. We're talking about migrants. We're talking about the cost. Are these questions going to be thrown to Kamala Harris? The interview is taped today. It's not even live.
Right. Some of the jokes are hilarious. You know, a strong, capable woman brings a father to a job interview.
What's your favorite ice cream?
Yeah, I mean, I must say I have my suspicions about anything on CNN these days. And look, I think the questions will not be that deep. I think they will be predictably surface-oriented. And if I were doing this interview, and if you recall, Rita, I wrote a column saying I should do this interview, I would stick to 3 or 4 main topics, and I would try to go in depth, because there are so many questions you can ask, which she can give a scripted answer, and if she forgets, Tampon Tim will be there to chip in. But I think the challenge for any candidate is to get beyond the scripted line of the great things you will do, and can you really describe the policy? Can you defend the policy against probing questions? And I'm afraid we're not going to see a lot of that. I think that this is a bizarre situation where everybody's in a scramble to get that first interview, and the person who gets it, the network that gets it, is probably feeling, well, we don't want to embarrass them. You know, they picked us, so we have to do a good job for them too. So there's a conflict built into this kind of selection, and as I say, CNN does not fill my heart with confidence.
You know, also it's also the fact that it's Tim Walz. You just brought up sitting next to her. Yeah, I find it, and I would love to, like I was saying earlier, have hours with her. I'd love to have 5 minutes with her, Michael, because there are so many questions, like you said, and so much flip flopping and such serious issues as we're talking about the border crisis and everything else, and yet. You've got Tim Walz sitting next to her. She wants to be commander in chief, and it looks like she's afraid to sit by herself before CNN. What does that say?
A softball interview. It's not just, please, it's not a real interview. It's a softball interview.
And it's taped. Yeah. It's not live.
And Michael, it's Bash. And Bash has already gone out on the record and saying that she was never the border czar. I mean, so she's already taken and staked out the position to defend her.
Yeah, I mean that she's taken that issue off the table. In effect, look, I think the two really worrisome signs beyond the fact that it's CNN, beyond the fact that it's Bash, are the taped issue. We don't really know what really we won't know, presumably, what we didn't see, what was the outtake, and the fact that Walz is there to sort of be a life raft in case she gets in trouble. And I just think those are two facets that I'm sure the White House and the campaign wanted. I would be shocked if CNN requested those two conditions, but I think both of them are designed to protect her against mistakes, and therefore it's not quite a live interview that you would expect. I mean, don't forget, this is her first one, and it's already being shrunken down into a bite-sized thing that she can control.
We were talking off air, and they were talking about they're going to edit this. I think they're just going to do a couple of reruns until they get it right.
Take again.
Right.
Take 27, Kamala Harris.
I don't understand.
We're joking around, and it's very, very sad. It is very, very sad. America has gotten down to this.
But John, every place I go, if someone's got a comfort animal with them, so she should have Waltz with her. I don't see what the problem is.
It's very, very sad.
Get on an airplane.
I don't know if I'd get comfort from that.
It's very sad. Listen, if this is happening at this point, how can she ever go one-on-one against Donald Trump?
Yeah, and the debate is supposed to happen in the ABC debate.
Or Kim Jong-un.
Well, that's it. But you're seeing also with the debate, right? The reports are that they're trying to let her bring in notes, right? So once again, this sense that she cannot hold a conversation or conduct a debate without notes, without help, without a tape. This is worrisome in and of itself. But again, it's not surprising when you look back at her career, particularly her career as vice president. I mean, the hysterical clips of her with the word salad and we'll be unburdened by what we've been. I mean, she's speaking in this language that sometimes, remember that one about Ukraine is a country in Europe. Russia is a bigger country in Europe.
Yeah, why should I go to the border? Why just because I'm the border czar? Right, the Lester Holt exchange. Right, it's incredible.
You guys are joking around, and this is serious business.
Listen, you know what Lincoln said, Sean? If I didn't laugh, I would cry.
Well, let's start crying.
Yeah, I think we need to start crying. It is, and to John's point, Michael, it is a sad thing. We just have a few seconds left, but how sad that we're at this point where we're sort of shoved this person who keeps flipping and flopping, is going to have, someone by her side. We don't know if the debate's going to happen, maybe, and America has such serious issues.
Well, particularly when you think of how the media treats Donald Trump. I mean, every word becomes a headline if the New York Times doesn't like it. Every word he says, every phrase he says becomes an attack line against him. So here you have his opponent having an editing process to make sure everything is to her liking, presumably. It is quite sad. It is quite alarming because of the situation in the world and because of what the Democrats are trying to do, continually trying to prosecute Trump. Persecute probably is a better word. And she's part of that administration. I mean, did she ever talk to Merrick Garland about these cases? Did she and Biden ever talk to Merrick Garland?
By the way, there's some breaking news here. Bronx district leader and Board of Elections employee charged with bribery, extortion, fraud, and, my God. Well, what else is new?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a lot of charges. Wow. Wow.
An identity of theft offenses, or whatever that means.
Wow. Michael Goodwin, thank you so much. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you, Michael, as always.
It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye, Michael.
Thank you. And by the way, John, right after the break, we have Governor Glenn Youngkin, who just recently removed from voter lists thousands of non-citizens. And he's going to be coming up next on the show.
Take that break.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. And, John, we have an awesome guest coming up right now.
Well, one of my favorite governors. And, Governor, I think you would have been the vice president, but I think you were too tall.
Well, good afternoon, John and Rita. Great to be with you. And as always, I just love our conversations. I have to say that, Virginia's competitive right now. And we had a poll pop out last week that had the Harris-Trump race in the margin of error. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that we are seeing Virginians and Americans recognize that Kamala Harris is the liberal left progressive candidate that everyone thinks she is. She just hasn't been forced to speak yet. And after 37 days with no interviews, she's going to have one. And of course, when she gets on the debate stage, she's going to have to express her views. And the reality is that she is the candidate who has said that she would never vote for a piece of legislation to fund the border wall. She is the one who was the border czar and refused to do anything about protecting America's sovereignty. And she is the candidate that was the last person to speak with Joe Biden before the disastrous withdrawal out of Afghanistan. I mean, this is a candidate who is flawed, and I think everyone knows it. And this is why I believe between now and November 5th, America is going to see the real Kamala Harris again.
Governor, I mean, there's one thing. Me and you, we grew up in an age of our country that everything was honesty and integrity. How can there be so many lies?
Yeah, what's stunning is I actually don't believe that Kamala Harris has flip-flopped. What do I mean by that? She hasn't come out and said that she doesn't believe in EV mandates. We actually have just seen or heard from staff on an anonymous basis suggesting she might be changing her mind on these things. The reality is Kamala Harris is the candidate who wants to ban fracking. She wanted Medicare for all. She said she'd never spend a single dollar on a border wall. She doesn't want to put any illegal immigrants in jail. She wants to give them free education. She wants to abolish the filibuster. And as I said, she was the last one in the room with Joe Biden before the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. She was the one that put her signature to pass legislation that unleashed unbridled spending. And finally, she is the border czar. And anybody who suggests she isn't, of course, doesn't understand that when Joe Biden says she's in charge of the border, that meant she was supposed to go there and fix it, and she didn't even go.
You know, Governor Glenn Youngkin, you also just recently kind of cleaned up the voter rolls. I say bravo to you. And you found more than 6,300 non-citizens that were on the voting rolls. We had Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, on yesterday talking about what they did in Texas. Bravo to you. But how concerning is this to you, that this is probably happening? I think about other governors across the country that are not following your charge, and they should be.
Well, I first believe strongly that the job of a governor is to make sure that our elections are fair, that they're trusted, and they're transparent. And that's something that I take incredibly seriously. The executive order that I issued did exactly that. First thing we've done is demand on a daily basis that our voter rolls are scrubbed using really straightforward data analytics. If someone's not a citizen because they are not a citizen on the Social Security list or in our DMV data, then they come off the voter rolls. And how about this? We do this very simple process, and yes, we find over 6,300 non-citizens on the voter rolls. We did something very similar, and we continue to do with regards to Virginians who sadly have died, and we found nearly 80,000 of them. that were on the voter rolls. This is straightforward data analytics. It's something that I think every state should be doing in order to make sure that America's elections are decided by American citizens.
Governor, this is Rudy Washington. We met at the Museum of the Bible at that event 2 years ago.
Absolutely. Great to speak with you again.
Yes. And don't forget, they want to pack the courts also. And we know what that means. They want to pack the Supreme Court. But, Governor, one of the problems we have here in New York State is that we have local municipalities signing up illegals to vote, and they get to the voting rolls, right? Now we come to a federal election. How do you distinguish between the two, where you got local municipalities signing people up, and now we come to our federal election, and they are registered voters?
Well, at the end of the day, they need to be very clear that non-citizens are not allowed to vote in federal elections, and if they do, it is a crime. And that's the last piece of my executive order, which is to post very clearly that non-citizens voting in federal elections is a crime. And I think it's just critically important to be very clear. The bottom line is that we can in fact scrub the voting rolls and make sure that non-citizens aren't voting in federal elections or in Virginia and state elections or local elections. I also am a big advocate of Speaker Johnson's bill that requires anyone who is registering to vote to prove that they are a citizen. And the reality is the decade-old motor voter rule created the ability for folks, either by accident or through nefarious reasons, to register to vote when they're non-citizens, and that's why we've been taking real action in Virginia.
You know, Governor Glenn Youngkin, also you're obviously, I think, fighting this and bringing attention to fentanyl big time. We're seeing this in so many communities. Rudy Washington and I were just talking also before the show of what's happening in Aurora, Colorado, where gangs, the Venezuelan gang has literally taken over almost the city. And it's because the governor is not intervening, letting it happen. We're seeing this migrant crime. And yet we have right now a White House that barely ever says the word fentanyl, barely ever talks about migrant crime. And it is polluting. It's sadly fentanyl and so many other things, every city, and including many there in Virginia.
Yeah, no, it's just a travesty. And it's also just heart-wrenching to meet with families whose children have been poisoned by fentanyl, where they thought they were taking a Percocet or something else, and it was in fact laced with fentanyl. This requires immediate action. The first step, and I have already mentioned it, is that President Trump, when he's president, must close the border, and he knows that. And he's got to secure it, and the free flow of illegal drugs and human trafficking and terrorists across our border is such a massive challenge that every state is a border state. And we today have, on average, 5 Virginians who die every day from fentanyl overdoses. We have gone to work. We've cooperated with federal, state, and local resources, and our drug seizures have gone through the roof. Just in the month of May, we seized enough fentanyl to poison every Virginia multiple times over, with a street value of $1.2 billion just in the month of May. This is real stuff. And that's also why we've gone to work to educate families and students and coaches and pastors and everybody else on the deathly implication of a fentanyl overdose. And then finally, we launched just yesterday a statewide campaign to unleash the families. These heartbroken families who have seen their loved ones poisoned are willing to go to work and advocate and inform and cajole and shame local authorities and many of the colleagues in Virginia who have not come along with us in order to combat fentanyl and what it means. I've also passed an executive order that demands that schools notify all families within 24 hours if there is a drug overdose in their school. We've got to shine a light on the deathly nature of fentanyl in this country. We know where it comes from. It comes from China. It goes through Mexico, and it comes over the border. And therefore, we must hold China accountable. But on top of that, get this border secured.
Absolutely. Governor Glenn Youngkin, Tony Carbonetti has a question.
Governor, I couldn't agree more. And the media was quick to start, the tally board during COVID when the COVID deaths started. This is a daily problem in every state in the country. It's going up. It's getting worse. Why do we not talk about this? Why don't they put this in the face of the American people of how many people are dying every day because of fentanyl?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it is, once again, I believe mainstream media trying very much to protect failure of this Biden.
They couldn't wait for that COVID death tally every night. They were quick to push that.
And they do not want to talk about fentanyl. And that's why we must talk about it. And I have to say, every time I go to high school, and my wife Suzanne has been on the absolute front foot on this, she in fact pioneered a national partnership with the First Lady in New Jersey, and the two of them brought together 35 of the first spouses this past week during Fentanyl Awareness and Overdose Prevention Day to bring awareness to this issue. And if we are not doing this, nobody will. Because the media has not covered it like it should.
Keep doing it. Keep doing it.
Yeah, keep doing it. Judge Weinberg.
Governor, good to talk to you again, sir. I think the real problem, and you alluded to it, is the China problem. If you had a strong leadership out of the White House, you would make it perfectly clear to the Chinese government, because they couldn't do this drug trade without the Chinese Communist Party and their government allowing it to happen. So you need strong leadership out of the White House. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why this election continues to be an election of strength versus weakness. And what we've seen from Kamala Harris is a career that displays weakness economically. And listen, her economic policies are nothing more than gimmicks that will drive inflation. Her foreign policy standards are going to just emulate Joe Biden's weakness, which has unleashed war in Ukraine, war in the Middle East, and of course China's boldness in threatening Taiwan, and then finally her weakness at the border. And the reality is we would not be in this circumstance today if they had just left in place President Trump's border policies. We've got to get back to being strong economically, strong around the world where we have peace through strength, and we must have a secure border. The net of this is, at the end of the day, it is strength versus weakness, and it's why we have to put strength back in the White House.
And, Governor, I understand Virginia is the number one state in the country in business increases.
John, you noticed.
I noticed.
Tell you what, if you haven't heard, CNBC ranked us the top state for business in America. And I will tell you that common sense conservative policies work. When we came in 2.5 years ago, Virginia was bottom third in job growth. The economy had stagnated. More small businesses were closing than you could possibly believe. And more people were moving away from Virginia than to Virginia from another 49 states. And in the last 2.5 years, we have gone to work with massive tax relief, regulatory reform, and we are the top state in America for business. 260,000 more Virginians working today, budget surpluses, and we continue to drive forward to create opportunity across the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Congratulations, Governor. Thank you for coming on, and we'll talk again real soon.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. And what do we all stand for?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
God bless America.